Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our annual organizational meeting of council held here today on Tuesday, October the 29th. And I'm going to start with our land acknowledgement this morning. We acknowledge the traditional lands and territories of the Indigenous peoples who have lived on these lands and taken care of them since time immemorial. We are on Treaty 7 territory, as well as a historical regional homeland of the Métis, which includes the Battle River Territory. We acknowledge and respect the histories, languages, and diverse cultures of the First Nations, Métis, and all First Peoples that have taken care of this land. We are grateful for their contributions that continue to enrich our communities. Looking at our organizational meeting here this morning, I'm looking for any updates or approval of the agenda. Are there any updates from council or administration for our organizational meeting this morning? Great. With that, I'll ask for a motion to approve this morning's agenda. CAO, Mr. Edney, just so you're aware, some of our screens are not...
You gotta turn on the bottom.
Okay, there we go. Never mind. User error. There we go. Can I have a counselor read the Counselor Grant?
Good morning. I move that council approve the October 29, 2024 organizational meeting of council agenda as presented.
Comments, questions? Call for the vote. Great, and that's carried. So moving to item 3, our council seating arrangements. This is being presented by our CAO, Kent Edney.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the chair to council. So as I mentioned, just as a preamble here, in an email earlier this week, we're just going to follow the requirements of our procedural bylaw for organizational meetings this morning. So the first item on the agenda that would typically come is a council seating arrangement. So this is generally in place when the new council becomes first elected. We just went through this process a couple of months ago, drawing numbers to get your seating arrangements. So my recommendation at this point is council remains in their current seating arrangement, but you do have the right, if you would like to make a motion to redo the seating arrangement. So I will leave it with council as to what your wishes are.
Thank you. Having spoken with council, I believe our public, I think a common theme that you're going to hear this morning is that there are going to be some things. So our organizational meeting is a legislative requirement, and so doing our organizational meeting annually will meet that legislative requirement. We are in a bit of a unique spot in that because we had a by-election, and after a by-election you also need to hold an organizational meeting, and so we're kind of doing the two meetings within a very short relatively period of time. But again, that is to meet legislative requirement as outlined in the Municipal Government Act. So with that, do we need a motion to leave the seating arrangement as is, or a motion for information, or what motion are we going to be looking for from administration? Oh, there it is right there. Can I have a councilor read the following motion, please? Deputy Mayor Ryan.
Thank you. Move that council remain in their assigned seat at the
Yeah.
Let's just delete all the from the July 3rd, 2024 organizational meeting. Delete all of that out. Change that to C. There you go.
okay.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
So let's do that again. Move that council remain in their assigned seat until the next organizational meeting, which will be held in October 2025.
Great, thank you. Comments, questions? Councillor Warzanowski.
Thank you, Mayor Dean. Just a quick question here to council or administration. October 2025, is that enough time for after the election for the next organizational meeting? Just want to clarify the dates.
Yeah, so the organizational meeting legislatively does need to be held in October. So the very first thing that you do, as you may recall, after we were elected, the very first meeting that you have to do is your organizational meeting.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. With that, call for the vote. Great, and that's carried. Moving on to bylaw review, bylaw 001-24, our procedural bylaw presented by Kent Edney, our CAO.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to council. Again, bringing another request for decision related to the council procedural bylaw. In our procedural bylaw and under the MGA, we're required to review the procedural bylaw annually at the organizational meeting. Again, this is something we recently did. Third reading of the procedural bylaw was on August 27th, 2024. Administration, as we've been working through the procedural bylaw and as we've been having some meetings, I've noticed with the mayor and with some council members, we might want to look at some updates to it. That's something that we'll work through as we have some time, just some minor edits, and potentially bring those back to a future council meeting. But if there's any edits or changes that council sees at this time that you'd like to put forward, this is the opportunity to do so. Otherwise, I'm going to recommend that you just receive this bylaw as information as it's already in effect.
Great, thank you. So with that, I think I would like the opportunity for council to speak to some recommendations that we may have with relation to our procedural bylaw, knowing that some amendments are going to be coming, but I do think that it would be valuable for us to provide council. I don't think we will be looking at a first or reading with this, if that's okay. I think we can just, if we are able to provide some suggestions for you to take away for us to review, would that be acceptable for administration? Great, thank you. Does any councillor have anything that they would like to see edited or changed or added to our procedural bylaw? Councillor Schindler.
Good morning. I looked at section 5.3.4, which is, if I may read, members may only speak twice on any subject, once in debate and once to ask questions. Members shall not exceed 5 minutes. The chair can permit an extension. What we've been doing has been members can generally speak twice per motion, and then once or before the motion, and then once for debate. So I'm not sure if we wanted to amend that to reflect what we've been actually doing.
Yes, thank you. In other sections of the bylaw, it does talk at the discretion of the mayor. However, I do agree with you. So we have been following our procedural bylaw. However, I would agree with you. I made a note of that as well, that I would like to see an edit to that as well. I think that our council has demonstrated, and the procedural bylaw is for the council of the day. And this council of the day has demonstrated that we very much enjoy participating in wholesome debate and wholesome discussion and bringing points forward, which I think is a strength of this council. And so I also would like to see an edit made to this. Councillor Schindler, do you have any kind of a specific suggestion that you would have for that, or would you like to leave that with administration to bring the suggestion back to us?
I could see administration giving us sort of a reflection of what we've been doing. I believe what we've been doing is speaking twice on any subject. Now, I just wanted to clarify, is that speaking twice as in we've turned our mic off, it's moved to someone else, and then we've come back? Or are we speaking twice as we turn our mic on, say, asking 2 questions? Because we've been going with 2 questions. So there's a little bit of ambiguity there.
Yeah, so according to the way that this is worded, I would interpret this as basically you are speaking once on a subject, so on an agenda item, once in debate, and once to ask questions. So technically you're making a comment and then only get 1 question. However, as chair, I have invoked the right to allow people to do that more, which I actually think, again, is a strength of this council. And so what I would like to see is I would like to leave it with administration to come back, as you said, Councillor Schindler, with something that reflects. I would... there are other provisions that are within the bylaw that allow the chair to move on with debate and or allow other councillors to ask for a debate to be moved forward. So I'm not saying that it is that we're going in perpetuity, so to speak, or people can just keep going. But I would like to see a change on that to reflect what council's currently doing.
Yes, I might start debating, so I'm not sure if you would like to actually put the motion on the table and then quickly debate this, but otherwise, I agree.
I don't think there's a motion being made here. I think what we're doing is providing administration with some suggestions. And so it's a suggestion.
Oh, okay.
The suggestion is that administration come back with a recommendation for us with regards to 5.3.4. Councillor Worzanowski.
Thank you, Mayor Dean. I just want to make a comment through the chair, again, through administration and the rest of council. I agree. The strength of our council is the ability to debate. I just want to make note that we want to have the opportunity for every councillor to make their commentary heard. So while the procedural bylaw does speak twice on any subject, that does sometimes, we are often, I think, hijacking sometimes some of the conversations. So we want to enable speaking to us a motion or a subject and then moving on maybe to the next councillor and then coming back. So I don't know if we can reflect that in the procedural bylaw, but it does happen, and we want to encourage healthy debate amongst the entire panel. Thank you.
Councillor Schindler.
I just want to add to that. Yeah. So frequently I have multiple questions or follow-up questions to the question that I had based on the answer. So I don't know if we have to reflect that at all in this portion of the bylaw. I'm just asking the question if we have to.
Again, I think let's leave it with administration, see what they come back to us with, and then we could debate it at that time. So the suggestion is we want to see it changed. Good. Okay. Are there any other suggestions from any councillors within our procedural bylaw? Councillor Sambo.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm also wondering about under motions 8.1.1 general provisions, unless otherwise determined by the chair, no matter may be debated or voted on by council unless it is in the form of a motion that has been verbally moved by a councillor. I did mention this the first time we looked at it, and I'm wondering, I'm still wondering if there's another way to articulate that. For motions arising, that can be really complicated, and we've seen a few times where we do in fact need a little bit of discussion and debate in order to get a motion on the floor.
Yeah, so again, I think that this is the key to this is unless otherwise determined by the chair, no matter may be debated. I think that we have demonstrated that we're allowing that questioning. However, I would agree that 8.1.1 and was it 5.3.4? Sorry, I know we were just talking about it, but it's it's early morning. These two both could be looked at. And Councillor Sambo, to your point, I would like to see us separate out questions, discussion, and debate. And so what I mean by that is, just provisions for allowing questions, right? Because at the end of a presentation, for example, we often see administration say, and if you have any questions. Councillor Sambo, to your point, within our procedural bylaw, it's kind of like, well, you can't ask a question until we make a motion, and we're all kind of annoyed by that. So I would like to see 8.1.1 broken out, where there is a procedure definition, if you will, for 1 for questions, 2 for discussion, and 3 for debate. Good. Any other suggestions from Councillor Worzanowski?
Thank you, Mayor Dean. This is a question, maybe it's a point of order. I know that there have been times where we've illustrated our position before the voting. Is it acceptable to do that before and after the motion has been displayed, before the actual formal vote? And if so, maybe we can add that clarification to our procedural bylaw.
Administration, I will rely on you for this one.
Through the chair, that's a good question.
We'll leave it with you.
Leave it with me.
Because I'll make comment on it based on my understanding.
Yeah.
So my understanding is that council, under our code of conduct and under the MGA, need to demonstrate an open mind on any subject. That open mind is up until the point, like during presentations and things like that. However, I have seen it done within other municipalities as well, where during discussion, it becomes clear how a councillor is going to vote. So my understanding of legislation is that so long as you have an open mind up until basically the end of said presentation, at the end of said presentation, if you are indicating how you are going to be voting, I do not see a problem with that legislatively, but I do believe that that could be a question we could put back to municipal affairs. But based on what my understanding of the MGA, I think you're on side when you do that. Councillor Schindler?
If I may, I mean, when you begin debate, you generally pick a side to debate on. So you're going to show sort of what side you're on based on your debate. So that's, again, after the motion is when you're going to pick your side and debate with the rest of council on said motion. So that's, I mean, that can be easily indicating where you're going to vote.
To be fair, though, Councillor Schindler, I think Councillor Warzanowski's point on this is that we have demonstrated it. So somebody presents and a councillor or mayor has said, I will be in support of this at the time of voting. So I think that's what Councillor Warzanowski's getting at. Not absolutely. If you're debating it, you're probably showing your cards anyway. But I think that the point of the MGA is that you demonstrate that during that debate, you have an open mind during that debate up until you're about to be able to vote. So that's what I believe, Councillor. I don't want to speak on behalf of Councillor Warzanowski, but I think that that's his point, is that if a councillor says, I will be in support of this when we come to vote, is that problematic? And I think that that's a great question to bring back to municipal affairs.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Dean and Councillor Schindler. That's exactly what I'm saying. And even if we're looking at it with a fine comb, is it acceptable to present that position before the motion is presented? Because often we'll debate a potential motion before it's presented, and then we may debate it after it's presented, and then it comes time to voting. So understanding just the code of conduct in regards to positioning ourselves in support or not in support of a potential motion that may be carried or not. So
yeah, I don't
understanding that in our the MGA procedural bylaw would be helpful, such that we're following proper code of conduct.
I don't think it's a code of conduct issue. I think it's a procedural issue.
Or procedural, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's a code of conduct issue. Okay. Any other suggestions when it comes to our procedural bylaw? Okay. Seeing no other hands, I have a few. One, I would like to see a provision added of, can we add council workshops? So this has been a conversation that has been had, and speaking with other municipalities, right within their procedural bylaw, they talk about council workshops. So I think that we could nip some of that conversation in the bud, so to speak, by just within our procedural bylaw having a definition of what a council workshop is, why we do it, how we have it, and how it fits within the MGA. Another suggestion that I have is meeting means an organizational, regular, or special meeting of council or committee. I'm wondering, do we need to add gap to 3.23? Also, I think the wording of 3.30, public hearing, is a little problematic. I think it means an agenda item. It's not a meeting of council. A public hearing is not a separate meeting. It is an agenda item on our regular council meetings under 3.30. Under 4.1.2, I wonder if we can just remove that. I have no idea what that has to do with organizational meetings. 4.1.2. All members are authorized to sign checks, agreements, and any other negotiable instrument on behalf of the mayor and deputy mayor, as well as fulfill their roles. I have no idea what that has to do with an organizational meeting.
Yeah, I think we saw that already. Well, sorry, through the chair, we noticed that as well. I think it's something we're supposed to agree to. So there should be a provision to say that council's going to agree to that versus the wording that is in there. So as mentioned, we've noticed a number of wording on these kind of things that we'll address in addition to your comments.
Great, thank you. 4.2.4.5, it says to make recommendations to council. So the Governance and Priorities Committee may only make the following resolutions, and one of those resolutions is to make a recommendation to council. What would be an example in a GAP meeting of a resolution that is a recommendation to council?
So through the chair, that would be an example. Let's say we wanted to talk about transit in the GAP meeting and have an idea on it, and the recommendation is to council that the the committee could recommend to council that we approve an increase to funding in the 2025 budget. So you can't do that at the GAP meeting, but you can bring that forward to the next council meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm wondering if 4.3.5 and 4.3.6 should be combined. They seem to be saying the same thing. So if at any point during a meeting quorum is lost, the chair, prior to the loss of quorum, must call a recess until such a time when quorum can be restored. 4.3.6 is if quorum is lost at any time, the meeting stands adjourned. If quorum is not achieved within 15 minutes, the meeting is adjourned until the next meeting. I wonder if we can just combine those two in some way. Okay, thank you. 4.14.1. That was a mouthful. 4.14.1 says maybe live streamed to the city website when appropriate. I think our meetings are always appropriate to be streamed on the city website. So I'm just wondering if those two words are redundant within other parts of the procedural bylaw, because other parts of the procedural bylaw do state that we do not stream in-camera sessions. Legislative services.
Sorry, through the mayor, can you repeat that number?
Yeah, 4.14.1.
Thank you.
So it's the live streaming meeting section.
I'm wondering if that language means that when appropriate being for in-camera sessions, allowing that provision for in-camera where it's not appropriate.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Schindler. That's why I said there are other provisions within the bylaw that say we do not stream the in-camera sessions. So I just think it's redundant. I mean,
It might conflict, and that's maybe why that's there. If we take it out, then there will be a conflict between the two.
okay,
That makes sense, and in my opinion.
Okay, and also under agenda format, I did notice that while it is on the, I apologize, while it is in the appendixes, under section 7 agenda format, we do not have moment of reflection, and we do not have public input. Councillor Warzanowski?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Dean. I also noticed in last meeting's, the October 22nd meeting of the council, we approved our template for committees.
Yep.
Should we add that potentially as an agenda item or an additional schedule to our procedural bylaw?
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. I think that works. That makes sense. Because we're going to be using it in meetings. So I think Councillor Warzanowski is saying adding the template that we had approved last week as an appendix as part of our procedural bylaw. That would make sense to me.
Yeah, through the chair to council, one of the things I've noticed, and I didn't have any hand in drafting this original, it's very, very, very prescriptive. And my question is, why does it need to be that prescriptive?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like, I think we should even just look at why do we have every single agenda point in the detail. We should have some flexibility to be able to move it around or make agenda items as we look at. So I'd like to take a fulsome look at that whole part of the procedural bylaw, if that works for council.
I think it's a great idea. I think you can simplify that entire section by saying see appendix.
Yes.
I would also like to see new business as a standing item on our agendas, because really it should be. New business should just be a standing item that sits on our agendas, so that if a councillor wants to add new business, that it's there. And it could be a good reminder for council that they have the opportunity to. I know that at the beginning of meetings, I always ask the question, council, are there any adoptions or anything that you want to add to the agenda? But I do think that new business would be a good standing item so that it's a reminder for council. Kent?
If I may, through the chair, I'd strongly recommend that we don't add things on agenda day.
That's fair.
If we don't have to, or on the meeting day, sorry, because it's, depending on what the item is, it's difficult to say that you've had an opportunity for fulsome review or discussion to make a decision, but that's part of this whole thing. Yeah, new business, a lot of what we bring is new business, so it might fit under there anyways, but so I think we could have a good conversation around what that whole section looks like.
I apologize for interrupting there, Mr. Edney. So then, yes, if we could do that, that'd be great. And then one other thing that I would like to see added to our schedules is a outline of the agenda for our organizational meetings. So our organizational meeting is outlined in our procedural bylaw, but there's no appendix that was done for our organizational meeting. And our organizational meetings are pretty standard as to what you have to do legislatively. So if we could have that added as a schedule. Those would be all the suggestions that I had for our procedural bylaw at this time. Councillor Warzanowski.
Thank you, Mayor Dean. And through the chair to you, Mr. Edney, one of the things that I just thought of as you were kind of speaking, I like the idea of having flexibility and, you know, in regards to the agenda or any type of layout. Just a question. I know that in our procedural bylaw, it indicates when we're supposed to receive our agenda packages prior to our next meeting, whatever that meeting looks like. Just a question for administration is, often we're giving you last minute suggestions to the agenda. Should we write something in the procedural bylaw? While we want to encourage that, we don't necessarily want to add everything to the agenda. And I think administration has been doing a great job, but not always necessary to bring it to the following meeting when you're receiving messages from council hours before the subsequent meeting. Just a suggestion. And if that's something that'll help our execution up here as council, let's think about how we can write that into our procedural bylaw.
Yeah, so through the chair to council, you're right. We're working on a lot of different procedures. One of the things, even in the procedural bylaws, it says all items need to be into the CAO by Wednesday at 4:30. I'm going against that already, and I've told administration it needs to be in Monday by 4:30 so that we have time to review and put the agenda together and start getting the agenda actually out on time, because we haven't been necessarily doing that lately because of that time crunch. So one of the things, if you noticed last week, I think Vanessa sent around the next 3 agendas as we've sort of got them sitting today. I'd encourage council to use when those come out as that opportunity to kind of get back to us and say, hey, I'd like to see this on, you know, the November 19th regular council. Can we add that in? Because one of the things that we've been doing up to this point is, and I've been guilty of it, is Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock, we're still writing a report to go on the agenda. And really what we should be doing is meeting with the mayor as part of this Thursday morning with the entire package, not just the front page of the agenda. So that whole section, I think, needs to have a bit of a review too, as to timelines and just making sure we've got enough time that we don't spend all day Thursday putting reports and agendas together. So I appreciate the suggestion.
Yeah, so Mr. Edney, thank you for that comment. I want to take a little pressure off our administration. I think our administration has been doing a phenomenal job being organized. I have nothing but compliments for the work our administration has been doing, the flexibility that they have demonstrated to this council, the work that you have done. I think it is important for us as a council to recognize, and for administration to recognize, that we came into this in July facing multiple challenges. Some of those challenges have continued, and we also have a situation where we had a new CAO who then started in September. And so I want to offer a word of encouragement that I think we've actually been doing a really, really good job procedurally. I think we've done a phenomenal job having our agendas out. I think compared to previous experiences that I have had on council, the fact that we have our agendas and our full packages coming out on Thursday on time, and that any time where we have seen where maybe something needed to be added, I feel like legislative services and our administration have done a great job informing council, whether via email or when we show up that morning, there's like an immediate acknowledgement of, hey, council, here's something that you need to know. So I would like to actually commend the work that our administration have been doing, because while there are still some challenges, I think our administration has been rising to those challenges in meetings. So I actually want to thank you for the work that you've been doing, and I appreciate your comments, Mr. Edney, but take a little pressure off yourself. You're doing a phenomenal job.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We appreciate that. But we'll continue to strive to do better.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that, right? As council, right? There's areas for improvement as council as well. We are not perfect by any means, but at the same time, I think it's also good to acknowledge that we're doing some really good work as a city right now, and I think that that's good to acknowledge. Councillor Sample.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I so agree with your comments. I was just wondering about adding items to the agenda. Would it be right to say that if a member of council wanted to add something, we should go through you as the chair first rather than straight to administration.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so the procedure for council is to present to the chair, and then the chair brings that as well. And the other thing that is within the procedural bylaw for you to be able to utilize is the notice of motion. And so a notice of motion with the secondary can then also be added, and that would be added at a future council meeting. Councillor Warzanowski.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Dean and Councillor Sandbo. My only comment was to take the pressure off of administration and our chair to give adequate time to make any adjustments to the agenda. While I think some things are necessary and can be discussed at any time, it's important to have that open debate. We also want to give you adequate time to prepare if we need to make any adjustments to the agenda or prepare information for council. Not a minute before the council meeting is what I'm suggesting. That's all.
Great, thank you. Is there any, what's the motion that you're looking for coming out of this item?
I think originally it was to accept it for information, and I think we can still do that. We've got some suggestions to look at for changes that we'll bring back to the future. We've got a bunch as well, so I think that's still an acceptable motion.
If I may suggest, would it be acceptable to administration for us to actually make two motions? One to accept for information, and two for administration to review the suggestions made by council and bring it back to a future council meeting?
Through the chair, I'd suggest let's just make that second motion.
Just the second
Just
motion?
the second motion, yeah.
Okay.
Because it implies you've
Yeah.
read this and accepted it.
So I'll take a stab at the organic motion here. Councillor Sambo, get ready. So the organic motion then, if you will be that council direct administration to review suggestions made by council for the procedural bylaw and to bring back to council at a future council meeting. Councillor Sambo.
Thank you, Your Worship. If we're sure that we're going to be discussing it, are we attempting at this point to be doing a first reading essentially?
No, because the first reading will come when they bring back the suggestions, I think. That's what we're suggesting.
Sure. Oh, I think it's adding an extra step, but I don't think it makes much of a difference.
Right, because remember too, we can actually do 3 readings in one meeting if we have a unanimous vote of council, right? So if administration takes us away and they come back and we like all the suggestions and away we go, we could actually do 3 readings of the procedural bylaw within one meeting. Mm-hmm. Good?
Yeah, works.
Do we have that motion on the screen? From council. With suggested changes from council. Council and administration, is everybody happy with the wording of this motion? Good. Can I have a councillor make the following motion, please? Councillor Sampo.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that council direct administration to review bylaw 001-24, being the procedural bylaw, and bring it back to a future regular meeting of council with suggested changes from council.
Great. Thank you. Comments, questions? Councillor Warzanowski.
Thank you, Mayor Dean. Sorry I didn't sneak this question in before the motion was presented. Should we time base when this is brought back? At least within a certain time, even before we run for election, or within the 6 months? Or I'd like to see generally with anything, a time base finish point on when we should bring any change to council.
CEO, Mr. Edney.
Yeah, through the chair to council, you can add that in if you'd like to. If I could respectfully ask that that maybe be a new year item, just because we're starting to come down to the last few meetings and we've got budget and all sorts of items coming. We'll always strive to do it sooner, but if you're going to put a deadline, if it could be kind of end of January, that would be appreciated.
So you don't want it to be like November 4th or anything like that?
No.
Okay. So can we put by end of January 2025? So changes.
I would suggest adding that as a friendly amendment.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Council, everybody good?
By end of January.
Right. Thank you. Is everybody good with the wording now? Any other comments, questions?
Your worship, shall I reread?
Yeah, why don't we do that?
Okay, I am happy to accept that friendly amendment. I move that council direct administration to review bylaw 001-24, being the procedural bylaw, and bring it back to a future regular meeting of council by end of January 2025 with suggested changes from council.
Comments, questions? Call for the vote. And that's carried. Thank you. Moving now to item 4.2, bylaw 002-24, the elected officials code of conduct bylaw, presented by our CAO, Mr. Edney.
All right, again, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the chair to council. Again, this is another requirement of our organizational meeting, is for council to review the current council code of conduct bylaw 002-24. We haven't made any changes to what is presented here from when you first approved it back in the summer. Again, this is an opportunity if there's anything that council sees similar to the procedural bylaw you'd like us to address. We just didn't have time to address it here, but we do have some changes in regards to how, I guess, complaints are initially brought in and handled. Right now, the complaints are actually directed to go directly from the complainant to our integrity commissioner. There's no provision actually for them to come in to me and forward them on, or to the mayor and forward them on. So that's something I'd like to see changed, as a lot of people aren't going to understand that procedure. And I'd like to see an addition where there's an informal resolution process potentially. Right now it says it shall go to the integrity commissioner and they'll decide if it fits under our bylaw, and then they'll actually do an investigation. There's no provision in there, to have mediation or, something like that, which I've found very useful in my past, where it could be just a misunderstanding, and sometimes a quick discussion and apology solves the entire issue. So that's something I'd like to add in there and bring back, but we're going to work with some legal advice and on how to do that, and look at some other code of conduct bylaws where they have similar provisions. If there's anything else that council's noted, I'd appreciate that feedback at this time.
Yes, thank you. Of note on the informal process, please ensure that is reviewed with legal, because I do know that a concern with our former code of conduct had to do with the informal process that was written in our previous one. I do agree that I would like to see some sort of a simpler process on a, I don't know, for lack of a better professional term, a simple oopsie. But I would like to see, I would like to ensure that legal does review that, because I do know that was a concern with City of Chestermore's former code of conduct bylaw. Mr. Edney.
Yeah, so through the chair, just to add on to my comments, I have seen issues in the past with that as well, where the informal process is handled by the mayor or the deputy mayor.
Yeah.
I would suggest there's an informal process that the integrity commissioner could go through.
Thank you for that
deal
clarification.
with offside, so there's no perception of interference or coercion or anything like that from any member of council.
Yeah, and I simply don't want that responsibility. So that'd be great. Deputy Mayor Narayan.
Thank you, through your worship. I think this is another good document to bring back, especially after Bill 20 gets passed, and I think it'll be worth seeing what kind of ramifications it'll have, both on the code of conduct document and also the procedural document, if any.
Yes, thank you. Council will be getting a review of Bill 20 coming up in November at our GAP meeting, which I think will be valuable for that. But absolutely, I think something that we are going to be struggling with, I think something that all municipalities are going to have to wrestle with is code of conduct reflected within Bill 20. There are multiple challenges that are going to be coming with that. To your point, Deputy Mayor Narayan, And so, having spoken with other municipalities, absolutely, I think there's going to be a further review that's going to have to be done should Bill 20 be proclaimed. Councillor Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Mayor Dean, Deputy Mayor Narayan, and through the chair to you, Mr. Edney. Going back to the comment in regards to the review of any code of conduct violation, I do like your idea of the informality to take care of things before we have to spend money, our taxpayers' dollars on that. I just want to ensure that it's unbiased and that's important. And also my second comment, if I may, through the chair, before the motion is put forward, what kind of time do you need to review the commentary here spoken today, your own commentary, and review of Bill 20? Because we want to put that time base again into the forthcoming motion. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair to council, I think if you're on a similar time frame of end of January, we can target both of these. Just again, like to take a fulsome review of this code of conduct bylaw as well. So
Great, thank you. Any other further comments or suggestions from council? Okay, I have a bit of a big picture question that I would like to pose. So as I was reviewing this, I noticed that under section 5.11, we still mention committee of the whole. So my bigger question is, as we make decisions on a bylaw or on a policy, that at times can have a ripple effect on other bylaws or other policies. So I'm just wondering, from a administrative point, from a council point, how do we ensure, or how are we reviewing that if we're making a change in this policy or this bylaw, how does that then get, how do we ensure the ripple effects are addressed across the board? Mr. Edney.
So through the chair to council, trying to think of how to put this nicely, but that just should be a general knowledge and responsibility that we do. I apologize, it hasn't been done up to this point satisfactorily, but it will be going forward. Something we're working on, and by me I say me and our interim manager of Ledge Services, is a review of all of these different bylaws that have been drafted in the past year, just for consistency and making sure that they're not contradicting each other, that terminology's updated and proper. And so that's something we'll be working on, and bring back any changes we note to council for approval.
And would it be acceptable for administration, let's say Councillor Grant in his downtime is sitting at home and reading something and notices that hasn't been caught, is it acceptable for him to just email through the mayor to administration and just say, hey, Mr. Edney, I did notice that this policy has a ripple effect on this, and so he could email you, CC the mayor, CC council, right, and just bring that up? Would that be an acceptable process for that as well?
Through the chair, absolutely.
Okay, yeah, so he wouldn't necessarily, sorry to use you as an example, I was just picking a name, but it was more of I just want to know, right, because he doesn't necessarily need to wait until the next council meeting, put it on an agenda, those sorts of things. It could simply be, because it's an administrative process, legislatively, he still has the ability to email the CAO, CC all of council, and just point out that effect.
Yeah, so through the chair, I just guess one little bit of commentary is, if we're working on a bylaw, for example, in the background, it's not changing the bylaw. Right. The current bylaw in its form that was approved by council is still active. The only important part where then where it becomes important is when we want to make those changes we're working on actually part of the legislation. So I know in the past I've seen there can be some confusion that every little adjustment or wording change needs to come through a council motion, but it doesn't. We can work on that via email, face discussions until we get a final product that we like, and then bring that back to council for approval. We can't approve any of those changes outside of it, if that makes sense. So I would definitely encourage any form of communication, suggestions, feedback, thoughts, all that stuff simply just helps our entire organization function better. So
Great. Thank you for that
Very much
clarification.
appreciated.
I think that's helpful for all of council. Council, are there any other comments, questions? I had some others, but knowing that this is going back for a fulsome review anyway, I think some of those other things are mute at this point, since that's going to be happening. Councilor Worzanowski.
Thank you, Mayor Dean, and through the chair again to administration. Just adding on to some of the commentary, Mr. Edney, is the mayor pointed out some inconsistencies in some of our definitions and stuff like that. While this doesn't necessarily have to be in our procedural bylaw or a code of conduct, when we're preparing any type of information for council, if we had a glossary of terms that we can refer to, that we would use such that every document that comes out has some level of consistency. That I just like to add that to make your lives a little bit easier, such that we don't have to review the grammatical and some of those smaller items that you'd see on any information brought to council. Thank you.
Mr. Edney?
Through the chair to council, that's something that Vanessa and I are working on, is a master list. And so if we want a definition for the Governance and Priorities Committee put into that bylaw, we pick it off of the master list and copy and paste it in so it's consistent through every single document we have.
Great, thank you. So then I believe the motion that we're going to be looking for is the same as the previous motion. Yep, there we go. Councilor. Can I have a councilor read? Is council okay with the following wording? Councilor Worzanowski?
Thank you, Mayor Dean. I motion that council direct administration to review bylaw 002-24, being the elected officials code of conduct, and bring back to a future regular meeting of council by the end of January 2025 with suggested changes from council.
Comments, questions from council? Councilor Schindler?
I just want to bring a little levity to this. Can we also add and cookies? Bring back this and cookies to council? No comment necessary. I'm just having fun.
Okay. Any other comments, questions from council? Call for the vote. Great. Thank you. Do you want to recess? Okay. Moving on to our item 5.1, policy 837, elected officials remuneration and expense policy. Again, presented by CAO Mr. Edney.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, through the chair, this is something that is required under our procedural bylaw to address during our organizational meeting. Originally, this has been reviewed, and I believe at the September 10th, 2024 regular meeting, council approved the current policy in here. We've taken the liberty on this one because we had a little bit of time to make some suggested changes to the wording to just clarify and make most of the provisions a little bit simpler and straightforward. Really, at this point, the intent is to approve council's compensation for the upcoming year. I know the way this is structured is it shows a table for every year for the upcoming 4 years. But generally, all of those have a similar cost of living allowance increase to each of those tables. So really what the intention here is for council to decide, do you want to have, and I apologize, if you look at the first table showing November 2024 to October 2025, we were intending to give 3 options at an increase of 2.5%, 3%, and 5%. For council to decide which I guess cost of living adjustment is appropriate. I apologize, the numbers for the 2.5 aren't on there, but they'll be just slightly less than the 3%. So it's really just that fundamental change. Which one would you like to see us include in here? And are you okay with the clarification wording that we attempted to make on this?
Great, thank you. Opening up again now for discussion from council. Are there any comments, questions that you have with regards to the remuneration policy? Councillor Sambo.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm wondering whether you or administration, or if anybody has any comparables to look at to understand where we're currently positioned with other municipalities.
I believe Ledge Services, Vanessa, you have something here?
Through the chair to Councillor Sandbo, we do have comparables. I can send them to you. I didn't include them onto this because I thought there'd be changes. That was my error.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the chair to administration. This is a little bit of a soapbox item for me. I'm sure you've all heard me talk about this many times. I truly think of this job as a service to the community. And because of that, I am not here for the financial implications, nor am I suggesting anyone down the row is. And to the counter of that, having sit in this chair and having seen how much work is actually done, I understand why there is the feeling that we should keep up with inflation and we should keep these wages moving and setting an example for union negotiations and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I would do this job for nothing. I really would. I would do it just because this is my community and I want to give back to it. So without bearing the lead here, I am not necessarily in favor of an annual increase. I understand that may not be popular, but that is how I feel about it.
Councillor Wozanowski.
Thank you, Mayor Dean. Councillor Grant and Councillor Sandbo, I agree. I certainly don't do this for the money, but I do believe in fair pay for fair work. And some people do have to make a living doing this. So I would suggest that and through the chair, administration to you, Vanessa, I don't think we can necessarily approve this today because there will likely be some changes as you can expect. In addition to looking at the comparables, let's also look at the comparables in regards to the other items on the remuneration package other than salary, inclusive of benefits, life insurance, etc. I don't think that council needs to have any type of special treatment regarding any other city employee. I would only suggest that if we're doing comparables compared to other municipalities, that we're fair and equal with inflation and regards to the entire remuneration package, inclusive of salary and extras. Thank you.
So I think all of that has been done. So there has been a full review of that. I do think that we're going to be looking for some sort of approval for this here today. The comparables were done, they just weren't necessarily shared. Now we could have them shared, but it is part of the organizational meeting with regards to that. So I'm not sure how administration is going to feel, but I do think at this time we'll continue the discussion and then come back to some other points. So are there any other comments? Councillor Rondawa.
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, I'll be echo with the Councillor Grant. This is for the community. For wages doesn't make any sense to me at all. Even whatever it is. If it's no wages, still I'll be 100% dedicated to our Chestermere community. That's why we are here for. So whatever the suggestion will come from other councillor or the administration, I will look into that.
Great, thank you. Councillor Schindler.
So I had a couple of points, or questions about some of the numbers. I'm just curious how they were calculated. So I'm looking at between the table and the first table and the second table, trying to see the increases. I'm just looking at the first line and I see that there's a difference in say the last number for mayor, say 97 for 97.3 versus 97.8. Is that the number with that 3 to 5% increase included in that table? Is that how that was calculated?
So the numbers on the left.
I'm thinking I might have just figured it out.
So the numbers on the left are 3% per year.
Yep.
The number on the right is 5%.
And then it's reflected
It's consistent
in the next
throughout.
one. Okay.
Yeah.
I might have just figured that out on my own. Right, sorry. And from yesterday, I was looking through this and going, further down, I don't know if you wanted to go page by page, but certainly we're looking at the increase to our daily maximum for meal allowances, and incidentals was removed. Was that part of other remunerations from other municipalities? Are we reflecting? Was that reflected?
CEO, Mr. Edney.
Sorry, through the chair to CAO. Mr. Edney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So through the chair to council, yes, we took, Vanessa did a great job of taking a look at other communities' compensation and especially related to meal allowances. So the change to the meal allowance was just to better reflect what the cost of meals is today. And I know we had some discussion around putting a specific amount for each specific meal per se. But sometimes, and I've done it in my past too, I have a really cheap breakfast and a really cheap lunch so that I can have a little bit nicer of a dinner or something like that when you're away. So this was really just to reflect that, and it's in line with similar municipalities that we use as comparators.
The other difference too that was added, just for clarification, is that you do need to provide an itemized receipt.
Yeah.
So it is not just a per diem where you just claim $95.
Right.
You have to present an itemized receipt so that you're not just because right now technically that's not how it works. And so I support that change as well, and that you are presenting an itemized receipt.
And any places that we go that provides food, we cannot claim for those in there as well. So, if I may, Chair, I have just a few more questions.
Absolutely,
about some of the things here. So, in training and conferences, I'm going down to point 2. So that's section 4.2, or Roman numeral 4.2, which would be on page 8. Sorry, I think our numeration is different. So under training and conferences, there it is there. Point 2. Where it says the annual training budget will be established based on identified training priorities through the annual operating budget process. Whose training priorities are those? Are they defined by the elected official, or are they defined by council, or are they defined by administration? I just wanted to clarify that through the chair to CAO Mr. Edney.
Yeah.
Yes, through the chair to council. So yes, that would be council's priorities. So generally what we're suggesting is we're going to include $5,000 per councillor right now as we're doing our budget. But if you sat down during budget deliberation time and said, hey, we want to do something different, we could look at doing something different and changing this. And then it's really just up to council and individuals to decide what are your training what are
Training
your training
goals?
priorities? I as I kind of read through that, it's contradictory, and I apologize for getting down in the weeds, but it's sort of like the first sentence says we're going to give $5,000 in the budget, and then it says, hey, we're going to look and establish it. I think we should just leave that last part out and say there's going to be $5,000 in the budget for council to do elected official training and that kind of thing. Would be my suggestion now that I'm reading through how it works.
That's sort of what I was thinking. I was trying to figure out, like, do we have to present our training goals to council to get approval, or do we have to be able to go ahead to do our training, and reflect it with our strategic plan, or how we were going to decide that? But if we take that out, I think that would just eliminate those questions.
I think we could also take it out because I think it's pretty, knowing that there's possible changes coming to our Code of Conduct bylaw. In our Code of Conduct bylaw, it also clearly outlines that you're doing this, that any training that you're taking is to improve as a city councillor, not for trying to utilize city funds to improve, say, a professional opportunity that you have for personal work. So I think it's clearly outlined in our Code of Conduct bylaw, and I do like the suggestion of the $5,000 per annum. Mr.
No,
Edney?
I do. I'm sorry.
So if I may, through the chair, just looking at this as a policy that potentially or will actually just continue in perpetuity, should there be a process in there that if a particular councillor wants to go do something, that somebody just vets that it is for those purposes? Like should it go to the mayor? I don't think it should necessarily come to me. I mean, I can provide advice on have anybody taken that course before, but I wonder if there should just be a process in there. And that's up to council just to vet through somebody that, hey, this is an appropriate thing to be expensing under this particular item.
I'm assuming you won't let me take a video game programming course.
I'll let you do whatever you want because you're my boss, and I'm not going to say no. As long as it's not illegal.
I don't have a problem with it being vetted through the office of the mayor. And then I would think that anything that would go above, say, that remuneration, if that's being looked at, or if the mayor is struggling on that decision, then the mayor has that purview to just bring it back to council. And then it can be a motion of council as well. Councillor Wozanowski.
Thank you, Mayor Dean. To remove all the ambiguity through the chair, should we throw it back to administration in regards to making those approvals?
I don't think council should be approving. I don't think administration should be approving council's desire for professional development. Right? That's like
Fair
your
enough.
employee approving what your boss can do.
But what if some future mayor doesn't like a certain councillor and just says no?
So again, this gets reviewed every time.
Yeah.
Right, by council, right? And sorry, Mr. Edney?
Yeah, through the chair, I do have a suggestion that administration could bring back some wording that just specifies exactly what you said in here. Educational courses or conferences related to development as a counselor and not in a personal capacity. And blah, 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 could be there. And it could be vetted through the CAO because, again, at the end of the day, if we put some goalposts on what fits in there, I can pretty quickly figure out what fits in there. And again, I work for each of you the same, right?
Yeah.
So that's my oath, is not to have any kind of bias or favoritism towards any particular counselor. So that could be, while I said it's not maybe necessarily the right approach, with some goalposts it could be.
And again, I think that is outlined in our code of conduct bylaw right now. So,
Fair enough.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mayor. Through yourself to administration, I would just like to preference my previous statement. I completely acknowledge the dichotomy of our choice here in that we want to be fiscally pragmatic for our residents, but we also, as a city, want to attract the best talent and expertise for this position. And those things don't go hand in hand. But at the end of the day, I do feel like there are enough great people that want to do this for the greater good. And that, you know, the example of that is everybody to my right. So while I am not in favor of it, I completely understand everyone's point of view, and I've had many conversations with residents about this exact point. And many residents do think that we should pay more to attract talent. Personally, I'm on the opposite side of that, but that's okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. You know, I have some comments that I think might be debate. Could we get a motion on the floor? And then could I make some comments?
Do you have a suggested motion?
I could certainly suggest one. I'm understanding that the request is to put a motion forward for these text changes as well as make a decision on 2.53 or 5%. I could put something forward.
Well, that motion's going to be coming, and so if it is around the 2.53 or 5, then I think we hold off on any comments on that until we have debate, because I have some comments that are not necessarily a debate, but comment that I would like to be able to make before we get to the motion.
Okay.
So, to Councillor Grant, I would say I'm struggling with some of the commentary. I would love to be able to do the role that I am within for free, so to speak. I still have a mortgage. And so I'm struggling with the idea. I appreciate your commentary that you added after with regards to doing it for the right reasons and those sorts of things. I also do think that there is a element that we should be looking at with regards to while previously when I was a counselor, I was able to have a full-time job and do it at the same time. So that was a different world for me for sure. As mayor, having served in this role now for almost 4 months, and as somebody who is still continuing with a bit of a secondary role, there's no way I could have another job in this role. We are the city of Chestermere. We are, and I believe that our desire is to be one of the big players at the table. And to be the big player at the table, I think you need a full-time mayor. And to have a full-time mayor, I think that you need to compensate that person so that they can live within the economy that is Chestermere. So I think our remuneration currently is fair. I do not think that I am over or underpaid, while at the same time, I think that a cost that relates to similar to what we do for union and a cost of living is a fair expectation because we don't necessarily do anything that with regards to performance or anything like that. So the public world is a little bit different, which, I mean, it's the world that I come from, but I am struggling a little bit with how to comment because I understand the heart of what you're saying, and so I don't want to take it out of context what you're saying, because I firmly believe that the city of Chestermere needs a full-time mayor that is advocating for Chestermere when it comes to working with the ministries, working with the provincial government, working with other municipalities, and to be able to do that, that mayor needs to be able to be compensated. Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Edney.
Sorry, through the chair, respectfully, I do believe this is debate at this point. So I would encourage council to either go back to just reviewing some of the provisions in here or put a motion on the table regarding something and then have this type of discussion after that.
I'm with you. Okay. Do you have a suggested motion that we would make at this time?
So through the chair, I think, well, there's two, that motion that we've got on the screen doesn't work because we're asking you to choose what the cost of living increase is. So I would suggest if that's what is coming around is the compensation aspect, which isn't already addressed in here, I'd put up a motion by somebody saying, I suggest that the cost of living increase be X. It can be anywhere from 0 to, well, whatever you want at 100% if you felt that was appropriate. But I would strongly suggest against that one. But yeah, that's what I think the first motion should be, just understanding what this this discussion is headed towards.
Thank you. Councillor Schindler?
If I may, I have just a couple more questions before we get into debate. Maybe I could have asked this offline as well, but what is best doctors and global medical assistance? I'm just looking at in section 2 on the table under benefit, and I didn't understand what that was. I could have looked that up, but
through the chair, I apologize. I'm not sure, but it should be in our benefit booklet
Okay,
somewhere,
I can look
describing what it is. I haven't used it myself personally.
I can look that up later. And so I also noticed in here that I don't see any provisions for if, for example, someone goes on maternity or paternity leave. Do we include that in the remuneration package? Leave for maternity and paternity?
Through the chair, I do believe that's in section 2E on page 3. In cases of extended absence, such as medical or parental leave, base remuneration will be prorated.
Yep.
I'd have to maybe look to Vanessa. I've read something specific to our allowance for parental leave for counselors in a different policy, though. Is it in this one?
Sorry, Vanessa.
Through the CAO to the mayor and council, in section, I believe it is the 2E, it does state, in the event In cases of extended absence as medical or parental leave, base remuneration will be prorated according to the employment insurance benefit calculation used by Service Canada.
My apologies, I missed that.
No
Thank you.
worries.
Okay, with that, okay, so I would actually like to see a motion come forward then that with a 2.5% to reflect, and this would be reflective of other things across our organization. So do I have a counselor that is comfortable making the following motion? Deputy Mayor Narayan.
Thank you. I move that council approve policy number 837, being the elected officials' remuneration and expenses policy with 2.5% increase, which reflects the cost of living.
CAO Edney, are you good with that wording? Council, is everybody good with that wording first? Okay, so we're good with the wording. We're not good with the wording. Councilor Warzanowski.
Thank you, Mayor Dean. I just have a question. As I'm reviewing our council notes from, I believe, a regular meeting of council on September 12th and what's being presented here, again, this increase as it's being presented seems to be applied after November of next year, or am I reading this incorrectly? The reason why I'm bringing this up before this motion goes to debate is, do we need to time base when this 2.5 increase is applied?
CAO, Mr. Edney.
So through the chair to council, the remuneration should go from November to October of each individual year. So correct me if I'm wrong, Vanessa, but the first table where it has the mayor of $95,000 is the first number. That's actually 3%. It'll be slightly less than that, but that'll be the remuneration from this November to the following October to coincide with the election cycle. Is that correct? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Edney, and through the chair, that's what was presented to council also in September, so it's consistent with what, it's 97,377, and if we look at our regular meeting of council, it's also the same amount at the beginning, well, basically November 1st of this year. So all I'm suggesting is when we put this motion forward, that we timestamp when this 2.5 is effective.
So that's in the chart. Okay. Also within that, then the question that then is everybody good with the wording now? Okay. The question I have then would be the previous, like our current one is 2.5%. So this just stays consistent. Is that correct?
No.
What's our current?
Through the chair, current is 5%.
Current is 5%.
Currently, all these tables were bumping up 5%.
Okay. Thank you.
Right? Yeah.
Okay. Councilor Schindler.
Yeah, I believe, I thought it was 4 actually, but cool, 5. I had a couple of questions or a couple of points that may require debate. I talked to other municipalities about meetings, and some municipalities do pay councillors for meetings that go over 2 hours. I'm not sure if that's a thing that we could implement here, but I believe that coming from a 3-hour meeting yesterday, I'm just wondering.
No, the difference is that in those municipalities, they don't pay salary. So there is 2 ways that councillors are paid, and in those municipalities, they don't necessarily pay. They would pay like a different kind of a base salary, and then they pay remuneration for meetings. We don't do that. We pay a salary.
Right. Okay.
So,
okay.
I mean, you could put it on the floor that we're going to do both. Mm-hmm. My personal thoughts on that is that we make a salary for a reason, because if you don't attend meetings, you are still getting paid. And if you do attend meetings, you get paid. In those other municipalities, if they don't attend meetings, they're not getting paid. That's the difference.
Right. Okay. Also, I did take a look at workload, and I'm just wondering if, based on our workload, if we had I don't know if other councillors would agree, if we increased our workload from 0.46 to a 0.5 to make things even from of the mayor's salary going forward. I know that we have been busting our bums, and I just want to make for the next council, for the next people that are going for this job, for them to understand that this is not necessarily a part-time job. It is quite involved. You have to do a lot of research and preparation for meetings and things like that. So I just want to be open and reflective with the public on how much we do, and then for those wanting to apply for this position later on, for or run for election later, that they are fully aware that this is a very involved position. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Councillor Grant? No? Yes?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Through yourself
Sorry,
to
I
administration.
thought you had reacted. I apologize.
I don't necessarily have a counterpoint to Robert's suggestion. I do agree. It is a lot of work, for sure. Maybe more in a part-time job, maybe not. It is a lot of work. My comment that I wanted to make, I have two comments. One comment I'll save for when we debate the motion.
Well, that's what we're doing right now.
Oh, okay, sounds great. So I won't save it then. So in the past, council hasn't approved their own remuneration. So I'm a little surprised to see that we have our last year here in this remuneration calendar. Usually council approves remuneration for the following council term. So this date for November 24th to October 25, I bet you is in our previous bylaw, remuneration bylaw.
Deputy Mayor Ryan?
Thank you, through your worship. So two things to Councillor Grant's comment. No, I think we do both. We do set this salary for the incoming new council, but then we also do it, I think it's in the second term of the 4-year period when we set salary for the present council. The second point is just a suggestion. I believe the proper term would be increase, which reflects the cost of living allowance. So after living allowance, if you guys would allow that friendly.
To Councillor Grant's point and Deputy Mayor Narayan's point, can we, and I believe that this is also what Councillor Worzanowski was getting at, our current policy right now, when does it end? What I mean by that is, when does our current, so if we don't approve this today, do we essentially not get paid starting on November 1st? So, or does our current policy go from November 2024 until October of 2025?
Through the chair, your current policy goes through to the end of 2025, and it includes a 5% increase for the upcoming year. So this is a question if you would like to change it. I'm trying to find the wording in here, but it's a two-pronged approach. This is intended to set the next 4 years, but you can come in and review at any time if there's changes in the cost of living, inflation's up, inflation's down, or there's material changes in our comparator municipalities. Is that correct, Vanessa?
So this timestamp then should start November 2025. Why no? Is that Vanessa?
Through the mayor for the rest of council as well. So the way that the formulas, they had them down is on your breakdown, you ended, the pay that you're getting currently would end at the end of October, and the new pay schedule would start November 1st in the 5% increase. So then the 5% increase that was currently on the old policy was 97377 for the mayor, 51610 for the deputy mayor, and 44793 for councillor. And that's at that 5% increase. It starts on November 1st of this year, which would be your new one, until October 31st of next year is the new increase.
Councillor Warzanowski, Councillor Sample.
Thank you, Mayor Dean. To council and administration, I've reviewed all of our documents since we've been in council, and that is correct. If we apply this motion effective of November 1st, 2024, you will effectively be giving yourself a less money than what you're asking for, because that increase does reflect a 5%, which is consistent with everything that Vanessa has presented to us. I also believe that we're premature to even make this decision. We are set, as our current policy states, until November of next year.
Councillor Sample.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hearing all of this commentary, I have a friendly suggestion to amend the motion to include that we would reduce the planned increase from 5% to 2.5% year over year beginning November 1st, 2024, which I think just might capture the way that the conversation is going. And yes.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'll say that again. My friendly was to reduce the planned increase from 5% to 2.5%. So that would be up a couple of lines. Year over year beginning November 1st. Reduce the planned increase. And I believe it was it the deputy mayor who made this motion? He would need to agree to that friendly, but that's a suggestion.
I think this is more than a friendly.
This is a change.
I don't believe it is, as the motion said 2.5%. I believe we're clarifying because the policy currently says 5%. And what I'm hearing is we're debating whether or not we should be changing the policy that's already in place. So my intention is to add clarity about whether we should be making a motion about this at all or just keep it as is.
Okay.
So through the chair, just where I was going is everything other than that, leave it the same as the deputy mayor had read. That reflects the cost of living allowance and all that kind of stuff. You're just changing the increase part of it.
So I guess for myself, what I'm wrestling with is I wonder if people had made certain expectations with regards to, we knew what was happening in November of 2024, and we thought that we were going to be doing this starting November 1st, 2025. That's what I thought we were doing going in. And so for myself, I'm wondering if we want to make, I'm seeing a lot of nodding right now. I'm wondering if we want to make this effective November of 2025. How do we feel about that, Councillor Grant?
Thank you, Mayor. Through the chair to administration and to council, I don't think we should be debating what our current remuneration is set at. We should be debating what the future council's remuneration is going to be set at.
Yeah, so then we would want this to start November 2025.
Agree.
Councillor Warzanowski, and then Councillor Randall.
Thank you, Mayor Dean. With respect to everyone, we don't know what's going to happen in a year from now. This is premature. There's been a lot of debate up here regarding what this needs to look like. Councillor Schindler brought some good points. Councillor Shanbo. We don't have any idea what things are going to look like. I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Grant in regards to we shouldn't approve our own salaries. That should be a decision made by previous councils, as should this decision be made closer to the time when new council takes their oath of office. Thank you.
Okay. I swear, I need people to raise hands and say words instead of just nodding at me right now, because you make it very difficult to chair. CAO, Mr. Edney.
Yes. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the chair to council. So I would suggest, if your intent is not to change November 2024 through October 2025, that we leave those remunerations as is, and the changes are just to the wording that administration has suggested in here, just the clarification wording. And if the intent is to set for the next council, I would wait till, because you can review this policy at any time. You just have to bring it to this to look at it and acknowledge it. So we could do this next July and set up what the future term of council looks like.
Okay. With that, I'm going to throw a suggestion on the table. Okay. Sorry, I see a lot of hands. So I'm going to throw a suggestion on the table and see how this lands. I would like to suggest that Deputy Mayor remove his motion, and then a new motion be made that reflects the conversation we are having right now, in that we will approve the wording changes. So the wording changes then would be the $95 per diem, making sure that you are always submitting detailed receipts, the wording for professional development. So all of that other wording, and we are not touching remuneration. So then, to Councillor Warzanowski's point, that we have a better fulsome discussion closer to the date, so that we can kind of see economy-wise, budget-wise, all of those sorts of things. And so my suggestion is that Deputy Mayor remove his motion. We would vote on that, right? So he would make the suggestion to remove his motion. We would vote whether or not we're removing the motion. Yes, no, or he just removes it. I think we just remove it. Okay. So the Deputy Mayor would withdraw his motion. I think we have to vote on that. Okay. Thank you. So that Deputy Mayor remove his motion, and that the new motion be made as suggested. CAO, Mr. Edney?
Yes, so through the chair, just under our procedural bylaw, 8.2.1, after a motion has been verbally made by a member, the motion becomes the property of council and may only be withdrawn by the member that made the motion with unanimous consent of present members. So the mayor has to, or Councilor
yeah.
Grant has to make the motion.
No, Deputy Mayor Narayan needs to suggest that he's going to remove, and we need unanimous consent to remove it. Ha! See, I read our bylaw. So sorry. So you're going to make the suggestion to remove.
Up to you.
So Deputy Mayor Narayan, would you? Sorry, Mr. Edney.
No, you go ahead and do this, and then
Let's start
Okay.
here.
So, Deputy Mayor Narayan, would you like to remove your motion?
Through your worship, yes, I'll remove my motion.
Okay, I would like to call for a vote on that, please. So we're voting on removing the motion. No, we just need a yes, no to show up on our screen. We'll do it by, okay. So I'm going to do it by hand. I would like to, so Deputy Mayor Narayan is asking to remove his motion. Where is it?
On your screen.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry, call for the vote. Thank you, Councillor Grant. Okay, that was fun. Okay, so now we're going to make a new motion, and the new motion, CAO, Mr. Edney. This is going really well.
through the chair to council, just a friendly suggestion, we could tackle this the same way you did the last two bylaws, and we could bring this back to a future with the compensation table laid out as it is today with our suggested wording changes at that time, because none of those wording changes are material to what's going to happen between now and that point. The compensation was the biggest issue we wanted to sort out today, so.
Thank you.
Just
With
a
that,
suggestion.
I just want to make a comment. I actually don't mind all of the wording changes, because I do like the idea of the itemized receipting, because right now there isn't itemized receipting, and I think the rest of the wording fits, and so I would be comfortable with making a motion on the wording and then bringing back the remuneration policy. However, I'm going to turn this back over to Ledge Services first. Vanessa?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My suggestion would be to agree with Mr. Edney, only because the council also made other suggestions so that it is actually captured properly, and then you guys can approve it with the proper suggestions.
Well, let's do that then.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Councilor Worzanowski.
No, thank you, Mayor Dean, administration, and Vanessa. And through the chair, I would agree. This was actually how the motion was originally drafted before we started our debate, which is ironic. However, as Mr. Edney suggests, if there are some friendlies that we want to add in here, I do believe that the revision needs to come back to council. We can review it thereafter again. So we can put these friendlies in, bring it back to council, we'll review those friendlies, and if there's other debate and any changes, when we want to look at this before the next council takes the oath of office, inclusive of remuneration, that's when we should do it.
Okay. So to the same way that we've done with the rest, I think we've made lots of suggestions. I think administration has a good idea of where we're sitting on this. But first, Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we move on from this, I just wanted to make a comment about your comment about the full-time position of mayor. Before we move on, just to make sure that this is out there, that I completely agree with you that the full-time position of mayor is not necessarily what I'm talking about when I'm talking about doing this for a community service. I kind of look at that more as from the council optics.
That's fair.
I'm not looking at this from the mayor optics, nor should I. But I want you to know that you do a fantastic job.
Thank you.
You put in so much effort, and you deserve every dollar you are paid.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And I also do view the role as mayor as community service as well. Absolutely. So with that, is council comfortable making the following motion that's on the screen? Okay. Deputy Mayor Ryan, you want to take a second swing at see if we can get this one through?
Certainly, move that council direct administration to review policy number 837, being the elected officials' remuneration and expenses policy, and bring back to a future regular meeting of council by end of January 2025, with suggested changes from council.
Is Councillor Schindler?
If I may, do we need to review this by the end of January? Can we bring it back later, or do we need to have it come back this soon? I mean, just for administration purposes and all that, Grad.
Mr. Edney?
So through the chair to council, I'd like to see the wording changes and the stuff around expense reports and stuff addressed sooner than later. In fact, I would suggest we're going to bring that aspect of it back in November. And then there can be a discussion later on next year about the remuneration, setting the remuneration for the next council term. And I don't want to get into debate, but when you talk about the remuneration for the next council term, I think it is important that that is set. And then when people do put their name in for election, they can understand what is that impact to their personal situation.
I agree.
You're always entitled, once you're in office, to make changes if that's what you see fit. But I do think that's the intent of this policy, is that if someone is going to quit their full-time job to become mayor, they understand, hey, can I pay my mortgage, and that kind of thing. So I do agree with those comments, just conceptually.
I agree. So then the wording does work, because by end of January, if something happens between now and the end of November, then you could go December, so to speak, right? So the end of January then does work. Okay. Good. Councillor Worzanowski?
I just have a serious question for Mayor Dean, and that is, will you resign as mayor to become mayor in the next remuneration pact? As public as I can make this under legislation, I have every intention of rerunning for mayor in 2025. There is no question in my brain. I will be filing my papers on the day that I am allowed to file my remuneration papers. I think that, and along that, I would be honored to serve beside the six of you for a full term. I think consistency in our government is needed at this time, and if I have the opportunity to work with the six of you for a full term, I would sign up for that tomorrow. So I would love the opportunity. It is an absolute pleasure and honor to serve with every single one of you, and the skill sets that all of you bring to the table are invaluable to the city of Chestermere, and you represent this community so freaking well. And I love working with every single one of you. So on that note,
Then stop it.
on that note, can I call for the vote?
You just did.
Okay, I'd like to call for the vote. All right, that's carried. Okay, I would like to call for a recess and come back at 10:45, please. All right.
I laugh because that's exactly the motion.
Oh my gosh. Good morning again, everybody. Welcome back. We're just coming back out of our recess. We just have a few more items here to accomplish here this morning with our organizational meeting. Moving on to 5.2, which is our council committee appointments. Again, presented by our CAO, Mr. Edney.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to council, again, another requirement of our procedural bylaw for organizational meeting is to determine the council committee appointments for the upcoming year. Council just did this at the July 9th, 2024 council meeting, and given that most of the committees have just started meeting and are just starting to get up and running, my recommendation is that council extend the current council committee appointments until the next organizational meeting, which is something that is allowed as per section 6.7 of the Chestermere Committee Guideline Bylaw. So that would be my recommendation, is to keep the council committee appointments the same as they are. Public appointments is a separate thing that's dealt with through a separate procedure.
Okay, so councilors are just going to stay on the committees that they're on. That's what we're saying. Yeah. So on that separate issue, though, public appointments, we're going to bring that back.
Yes, so through the chair to council, one of the things that I've noticed in the committee guideline bylaw that I find inconsistent is that it talks about member appointments are from January 1st to December 31st, but it then doesn't split out council versus public, and I think that's intended to be the public's term is January 1st to December 31st, but obviously next year you can't appoint any member on this council to December 31st because there'll be an election. So I think it should be council from organizational meeting to organizational meeting and public from January 1st to December 31st for consistency. So
that would make sense.
We will bring back the expiring public appointments at one of the next council meetings for discussion and to be dealt with.
Thank you. So you do not need direction from council on that because you're already just doing it.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Automatically just doing it.
Okay. So with that, I would like to ask a councillor to make the following motion, please. Councillor Randhawa.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that the council extend the current council committee appointment until the next organizational meeting as per section 6.7 of the Chestermere Committee Guideline Bylaw.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Councillor Sambo.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering if this captures also the library board, of course, because I'm not sure that we appointed terms for Councillor Rantawa and Councillor Schindler.
This would include all of our committee appointments. So, because there are 4 that are not council committees, this would include those as well.
I don't believe we set a term when we originally did establish them, so it wouldn't be just carrying it forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so these are all carrying forward. So the library, every committee is going to carry forward with the current council members until the organizational meeting in 2025.
So we're appointing for a new 1-year term? That's what I'm clarifying. Because library board appointments can, of course, be 1 year, 2 year, or 3 years terms.
We are extending all of them, so nothing's going to change. Yeah. Good? Councillor Randhawa?
I have a question. If we are saying the all, and this, why is always it comes to the library board? Why is not other boards as well? It's never mentioned.
Yes, thank you. So again, that's why I'm saying this includes everything. So this includes all of our committee appointments, whether because again, there are 4 committees that are outlined within our committee bylaw. I don't have it at my. I believe I could look it up here, but there are 4 committees. So it is that 4 committees that are treated slightly differently. That is the Assessment Review Board, Subdivision and Development Appeal Board, Chestermere Library Board, and Chestermere Emergency Management Agency. What we are saying with this motion is that nothing is changing until after the election. Is that clear? We're good? Good? Okay, great. Can I call for... I'm delaying on purpose. Can I call for the vote? Great. I'll call for the vote. Awesome. And that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Deputy Mayor schedule. I believe that this will be a very quick item.
Yes, thank
Sorry,
you.
CAO, Mr. Edney. That was
all
sorry,
right.
my fault. That's totally on me. Thank you for thanks for following procedure there, CAO, Mr. Edney. Clearly, I had a bit of a malfunction there.
That's all right. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to council, again, another requirement is to approve the deputy mayor rotation schedule. This was just done, I believe, on August 27th. So again, my recommendation is to keep the same deputy mayor rotation schedule that was approved at that time, which covers you through the end of this current term and allows every councillor to have a shortened time as deputy mayor.
Yes, thank you. I believe that we had a very robust discussion about this at this time, and so I think council is pretty comfortable with how it's been. So can I have the motion on the screen, please, and have a councillor make the following motion? Councillor Schindler. Just need the motion on the screen. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
I move that council follow the provisions outlined in procedural bylaw number 001-24 and accept the deputy mayor rotation schedule as presented.
Great, thank you. Comments, questions? And call for the vote. Great, and that's carried. And our final item is the council meeting dates for 2025, also presented by our CAO, Mr. Edney.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, through the chair to council, the recommendation is here that council adopt the 2025 council meeting dates as presented on the calendar that's attached to the RFD. Just want to point out a couple of things. We have delayed the initial governance and priorities committee meeting in January to the 21st from the 7th, so it's not right after, trying to put agendas together over the holiday break. But we've kept generally the same schedule as this year. It's, of course, the second Tuesday and Thursday of every month for regular council meetings, and we have scheduled once a month the Governance and Priorities Committee meeting into that schedule where it seemed to make sense. Two dates that are circled on the calendar would be April 22nd and October 14th. Those are Tuesdays after a long weekend. I heard feedback that traditionally we don't do a meeting right after the long weekend. My previous role, we did them anyways, so it's just a question to council. Would you like to keep those two dates where they are in the calendar, or would you like to move them to a different date? Perhaps the Wednesday or a different Tuesday. Just looking for some feedback.
My suggestion would be that knowing that we have counselors that do have other work commitments, I think what people have done is when they signed up for this role that they knew council meetings were going to be on Tuesdays and have structured their other work lives accordingly. So I would suggest leaving them for the Tuesday. The other date that I would like to point out is just to Councillor Warzanowski's question from earlier. You'll notice that the election day is on October the 20th, and then the organizational meeting is scheduled for October 28th. So that gives the time for the swearing in and all that kind of stuff happening there. So my suggestion would be to leave it, given again that, I'm sorry? Right. And then I mean, we can also, there's legislative procedure if we want to make changes, but I would suggest approving the calendar as suggested. Mr. Edney?
Just through the chair to council, I'm sure someone will notice it, but just at the bottom, there's a typo saying organizational meeting October 29th. That we will change that to 28th.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Warzanowski?
Thank you, Mayor Dean. I know we had a lot of debate earlier in regards to remuneration policy, and in that consideration, I don't want to go back in time, but would ask that, we review that other municipalities that we're comparing to have similar amount of council meetings. And also, we've done a lot of work in the last 3 months. Everybody's expressed how much extra effort it is to be a public servant. I'd suggest that we review August as well, as traditionally August in most municipalities is time off for councils.
That's true, and that's been true for us as well. So what we could do is that we could have the suggestion within the motion to approve the calendar with the removal of the August council dates. Councilor Wozzanowski.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Dean. If I may add, we get a lot done. We don't need to have meetings every single week to get the same amount of work done because this council is so effective.
So, Councilor Wozzanowski, would you like to make the motion to approve the calendar with the exception of the August dates?
Yes, I'd be prepared to make that motion.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Motion that council adopt the 2025 council meeting dates with the following amendment. Removal of the August council dates.
Comments, questions from council? Thank you. Call for the vote. Oh, sorry, Mr. Edney.
Sorry, through the chair, I know you just counseled, but I don't like the wording of August council dates. Maybe August meeting dates covers governance and priorities and
Okay.
council committees.
Thank you. All right.
I'll restate it if I may, Chair. Okay. Motion that council adopt the 2025 council meeting dates with the following amendment. Removal of August meeting dates.
Comments, questions? Call for the vote. Fantastic. With that, I believe we are at adjournment. If there's nothing else, we're good. I'd like to have a councillor make the following motion, please. Councillor Randawa.
I move that the organizational meeting council adjourned at 11 a.m.
Comment. Call for the vote. Councillor Schindler, Councillor Sambo, we're waiting for a vote. Thank you. And that's carried, and we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Isn't there a procedural bylaw? You can just adjourn, can't you?
No, within our procedural bylaw, we're supposed to call for the vote, yeah.